It's the Karen Reed retrial. As the prosecution ends its case, they bring in their biggest witness yet, the expert, Dr. Judson Welcher. Did he do any damage to the Karen Reed defense?
The defendant, Lexus, struck Mr. O'Keefe.
That is what happened. Objection, move to strike.
We'll use our expertise to break it all down. All that and what it means for your weekend on the Comm Center. Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who are called by a small town sheriff to investigate when a duck pond sparks panic at a local church. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher. I've been doing that job in my community for 10 years. Joining me as always is my podcasting partner with Police Benefits. That's Drew Breezy. That's a fake name, but it doesn't stop him from being an authentic cop. 29 years on the force. Drew, how have you been in the past week?
Been great. It's unseasonably warm here, but it's Florida, so it's always unseasonably warm. I enjoyed the fact that there was cooler weather later this year because I'm a big fan of leaving my sliding glass doors open, and that is not an invitation for you to burglarize me.
Burglary, the funnest crime of all, and Drew Breezy an easy target. Also heating up is the Karen Reed case. The prosecution finished up their case last week. We know that we've talked about this plenty. We've had lots of videos on many aspects of the Karen Reed trial. If you're watching this and you kind of get to the end and you're like, well, why didn't they talk about this or that or the other thing? The chances are we already talked about it. It's just another video. Please go back through and watch our other videos on that. You'll be surprised to see what we talk about. But
John, we actually have a playlist ready to go for you.
There's a playlist.
It's the Karen Reed playlist. You can start from the bottom and work your way up, just like we did, John.
Even for the laziest YouTube watcher, we have made it easy for you to watch all of our Karen Reed content. But we all know, we've discussed in this case plenty, that the police had a certain amount of issues with their credulity, their credibility. Did they do a good job? The Karen Reed defense did a very good job of setting them up to look like they were incompetent, they were corrupt, they were bad people. And certainly people like Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan and some others did a good job of helping the defense. So the state has got to come in hot. They brought in a ringer, a total egghead. They brought in this Dr. Judson Welcher.
Dr. Judson Welcher, he's a nationally recognized biomechanical engineer, and he's an accident reconstruction expert. He has nearly 30 years of experience. I think it's like 28. He served as a court-qualified expert witness in 200 trials. That's nothing to sneeze at. You have to qualify with each judge in each trial. And he's currently the senior executive of Aperture LLC. It's one of the country's largest forensic engineering consultancies. Defense attorneys all around use this firm.
He's consulted on a lot of roller coasters and stuff. He's the reason why there's not just a big graveyard at the end of the roller coaster at Disneyland.
Right. So he's led testing and reconstruction involving vehicle movement and injury patterns. He's like the foremost expert on stuff like that. He's consulted in civil and criminal trials for product liability and ride safety litigation in the amusement industry, like you talked about.
Yeah.
He also has supported ASTM ride safety standards with live force testing. So he does these
real people with dummies. Yep.
Yeah, he's the one that determines whether the loop-de-loops on your roller coaster are going to send you into some kind of cardiac arrest.
He's one of the foremost experts in his field, and his credibility is really, really, really important to the prosecution. We saw that the prosecution lost some of their credulity, the credibility with the police officers. We've done a couple episodes on why police officers in this case are not to be trusted. So they set up Dr. Judson Welcher to kind of come in as their ringer, their last guy at the plate. He's going to hit the home run. He's going to come in with all the data. We can talk about laws that were violated, whether it was due process laws, whether it was laws about how you gather and admit evidence to the court. The laws that he's talking about are not laws that anyone can controvert. He's talking about physics and mechanical engineering. This is stuff that is based on the universe, something that no one can undermine, and he's the foremost expert in it. So he's going to come in, he's going to apply that expertise, everything he knows about laws of motion, and it's going to be incredible to see him on the stand.
It's easy to say that he's condescending and arrogant because he could say whatever his testing method was and just say, well, you probably won't understand, but let me try to explain it. But the fact of the matter is, you probably don't understand it. So he's going to try to explain it. And he's actually lauded as one of the better deliverers of stuff like this. That's why he's so sought after in these trials. And that's why he was teaching. That's why he was a professor. That's why he's taught law enforcement crash and collision investigation and the effects on the body and everything else, because he has a way of delivering it.
Likability is going to be huge. Obviously, the jury might not like all the police in this case. The public surely doesn't. But there's going to be a little bit of a problem here. The stuffy guy, the professor guy, the smartest guy in the room, maybe Drew and I might know something about that. Doesn't necessarily make you the most popular. So he's got to find a way to have personality and to reasonably translate everything that he's done on a theoretical model, on a practical model, and relate it to the jury. Let's see what he does. Let's see what he did with the vehicle.
Everything's governed by the laws of physics and principles of engineering. So I'm looking at how physical forces, the outside of the car, for when people are inside the car, seat belts, airbags. The first seat belt was patented by an engineer. It's engineers who quantify the force of the crash and what kind of injury damage there is to the body. If you're going to talk about what happened to the cars or what happened to the people, to look at what happened to the cars, meaning to actually look at the cars, not just look at photographs when possible. For example, on the Lexus, I climbed in it, over it, underneath it. I downloaded data from it.
So just to be clear, what he did is he went and he looked at Karen Reed's actual Lexus, the vehicle that the Commonwealth is saying is the murder weapon in this case. But he also went out and got an exemplar Lexus that he could do all kinds of tests on. Welcher is going to be sort of the counterpoint to the medical examiner. She said that blunt impact injuries to the head was the cause of death, but she could not establish the manner. Welcher is going to make the case that the car is the murder weapon, and he's going to try to match it to the body. But that's not the only thing he's going to do. As we all know, the taillight was broken, and asking the jury to figure out when and where was it broken is pretty crucial to understanding. It's just as crucial as trying to figure out, was John inside the house? Was he moved? The temperature of his cell phone battery, how did that all play into it? So they took some data from Karen's car. Does the data, the telemetry from Karen's Lexus, does that show that she hit John? Let's see what Welcher has to say.
Lexus is a 6,000-pound vehicle. Mr. O'Keefe's only 216 pounds. So it's not going to register.
So what Welcher's going to do is he's going to use his experience, his expertise, his knowledge as a physicist and an engineer to develop a hypothesis about what happened if John and the Lexus collided. And then as a scientist, he's going to take that hypothesis and he's going to test it. And he's going to do some experiments, on the formula table, just running the math. Then he's going to have a 3D model. He's going to have little tiny cars and a little tiny man that he's going to move around. And he's going to say, based off of the results, if we conclude that the Lexus hit John, does it leave behind evidence that is consistent with what we can see? Drew, you pointed out that Welcher actually has a video where he breaks down the Ring camera and turned it into a 3D model. Would you like to look at that? Hey, before you do anything else, make sure you're doing all those YouTube things. Hit like, hit subscribe, and there's a good chance that we said something by now that was inaccurate or pissed you off. So go ahead and leave a comment below and we'll get back to you. Drew?
I bought into the theory that Karen backing out of the garage is the reason why her taillight was cracked. I was hook, line, and sinker. I bought into that theory until I watched this it's not even a reenactment. This is 3D modeling, very precise measuring equipment. And frankly, it shows that the taillight was not affected at all when she backed out of the driveway. So let's take a look at what he says.
What we've done is we've now overlaid the points from the laser scan. So now each one of these little speckly points, we know the exact 3D coordinates of those. So we can now know the exact position of all these fence posts, all the positions on the driveway, and we can use that to calibrate. So using that information, it's called solving for the camera. We verify that we have appropriate residuals, meaning we don't have too much error. Okay, subject video with the control points overlaid on it. That's a subject video where we're phasing in the laser scans of the scene. And what I'm trying to illustrate is how well we were able to overlay the point cloud onto the video data. So, for example, if you say watch one of these fence post points up here while I toggle between the video, there's a laser scan, there's the video. So we've done a good job. Again, the residuals show that we've done an adequate job of matching the data. So what I'm doing here is toggling between, this is the video of the car. And remember I told you I went out and I inspected Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle and did a laser scan of it? So we're now taking that laser scan of the video, or excuse me, of the vehicle, and overlaying it onto the car in the video. So this is the video image, that's the laser scan laid on top of it. So we know all the dimensions in the laser scan, we know all the dimensions in the scene of this. We have the tire tracks. We can create and take data points along the tire tracks, create a map of those. So green is the right rear. Again, the vehicle's backing out, coming out this direction, backing here, stopping, pulling forward towards the bottom of the screen. Backing out here, pulling forward like here. This is the Lexus lined up. This is when the Lexus has come to a complete stop. So this would be maximum engagement. We've now overlaid the Lexus laser scans on top of the image of the Lexus. So there's the video image, a still image that we took from the video. And here's where we overlay the laser scan of the Lexus. So we've overlaid the laser scan of the Lexus onto the Lexus. We've overlaid the laser scan of the Chevrolet onto the Chevrolet. And we've overlaid the laser scan of the scene onto the scene. So now what that allows us to do, we now know the position of everything in there. And we've also tracked the position of the tire tracks. So that's what it looks like if you overlay the computer model of Ms. Reed's vehicle onto the tire tracks. And then I'm just toggling slide 89 where I turn the vehicle off so you can see how the tire positions match up. Another toggle of slide 89, how the tire positions line up with where the end of the snow was. From all that information, again, we lined it up in the video, we lined it up in the scene, we have the two vehicles. We can get the exact position of the vehicles when that Lexus stopped. So when that Lexus stopped, that's going to be the maximum engagement. So from that information, we can get the angle of the vehicle, we can get the degree of overlap, the impact configuration, and it's hard to see because of the angles and because these vehicles are not at right angles to each other, the exact contact on the rear of the Chevy Traverse. So you can see we actually, I mean, you can't see. So we took a whole bunch of data points within those two areas where the snow got dislodged, and we're looking at where that is. So if you look at that on the vehicle, so this is where it is on the rear of Mr. O'Keefe's Chevrolet. You can see it's about 25 and a half inches above ground, 32 and a half inches above ground. Here's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. So these marks, this is the Chevy Traverse words, are approximately right here. Again, I had the opportunity to inspect Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. There's no damage where these marks are. So sure, it knocked the snow off, but it wasn't sufficient to cause damage to his vehicle. We then mapped that data onto Ms. Reed's vehicle to look at where that height is. So you can see the only contact marks are down at the bumper level. I mentioned how that bumper sticks out. This is exactly where you'd expect it. So the only evidence of contact is nowhere near the upper tail light. I emphasize the word upper tail light because it is right in line with the lower tail light. But yet the lower tail light also was not broken. So again, 25 and a half, that's 24 right here, 25 and a half, that's 24 right here, 25, 25 and a half. That's right where that scuff mark was. It's also right at, again, the level at the top of that light. This light is not broken. I've looked at the front of it. I've looked at the back of it. I've looked all around it. It's not broken, and it sticks out further than the light above it.
So, Drew, you said that video actually changed your mind, that you believed that the taillight had been damaged at John O'Keefe's place. And now you're saying that, you know, this guy that we literally do trust with our lives, we trust him to be smart enough to make a roller coaster safe. And we can have him look at these models and these videos and make this all up. Are Karen Reed supporters going to believe this? Are they going to be convinced by this at all? Or what's going to happen?
No, the pulse of what I saw, like, I watched a lot of his testimony, most, if not all of his testimony. And the pulse of the whole thing is like, oh my God, he's so condescending. And I get it. Like, but they're saying, they're almost angry because he's like showing you on a 3D model that he invested some time in, and he's like one of the foremost experts in his field. And he's disproving the theory that this is just a complete setup. And the defense team rightfully should be very nervous about this. The prosecution may not have slam dunked with this guy because there were other issues with other witnesses, obviously. And this, if you get this reference, then you'll think it's very funny, but this was basically the concert at the end of Revenge of the Nerds. So like the finale was this guy. And
I'm a bit more of This Is Spinal Tap. So if it's the concert at the end of This Is Spinal Tap, I sure hope not.
With Stonehenge.
Right.
But this is like their finale. In addition to, like, they played some more footage of, and I don't want to get too far ahead of this, but they played some more footage of Karen Reed questioning herself, like saying in an interview, like, I ran through all the scenarios. Did I hit him? How did I hit him? When I hit him, da-da-da. And whatever she said, I'm not saying those are her words. It was words to those effect. I was definitely convinced that you can account for the broken taillight by her backing out of the garage, especially when he had Sergeant Buchanan on the stand. They showed the wheel rolling, and it took him like 3 or 4 tries to finally admit it. But yeah, it looks like there's definitely contact made between these two vehicles. But this guy used 3D modeling to measure the height of both vehicles. He
Right.
can show you on just a regular photograph, a still image of the Ring camera, that there was snow displaced from the edge of Karen Reed's Lexus bumper. And he can show you the height of the two, that it's improbable.
Buchanan being forced to admit that the vehicles collided.
Yeah.
And so that was a big moment. This essentially undoes that to say, yeah, they collided, but the taillight wasn't broken.
Yeah.
I think we can convict Karen Reed right now of being a terrible driver. But but now we're left to ask ourselves, how was the taillight damaged? He created something, a practical demonstration to show what that would look like. Let's see how it went. So you can see here that he even dresses up like John for maximum authenticity, and has a Karen Reed imposter back the vehicle into him very slowly to see with blue grease paint where the contact point would be with John if he's standing out there on his cell phone outside in front of 34 Fairview.
With a
Attached a bunch-
with a cocktail glass in his right hand. And if you remember, the medical examiner testified to the bruising on his on the back of his right hand also.
But this is not a perfect test, right? The road conditions aren't
No.
the same. It's not snowy. It's a sunny day. The driver of the vehicle is not angry, not intoxicated. Welcher noted that Reed's SUV reversed at approximately 23.9 miles an hour over 50 feet at the time that John O'Keefe's phone stopped moving, indicating a potential collision. And from that, what do you get? Do you get results that are consistent with what we have? We have wounds on his body. A lot of people are saying those look like dog bites. They don't look like dog bites to me because a dog has an upper and a lower jaw. And so you kind of like, you get like a matching bite on both sides of his arm. I don't see that. Yes, this is my practical demonstration of how a dog's
You
jaw
need
works.
counter pressure. You like,
Right.
if the dog is like this,
Bite your own arm, everyone. Just do that.
Right. If the dog doesn't have a lower jaw, that's consistent.
Right. And how do you bite without a lower jaw? So what conclusions did he gather from this test?
The location and orientation of the laceration on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arm are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right tail light.
Okay, so are consistent is such an operative and huge phrase here, because you can do all kinds of scientific exercises and experiments, and they can kind of be close to the truth. They can represent a kind of truth. The ME couldn't say the manner of death, whether or not it was an accident. And Welcher can't say if it was Karen's specific Lexus. Karen could have jumped out of the Lexus and someone else could have jumped out of the car. And in that case, Karen would also not be guilty, and John could have been hit with that Lexus. More to the point, what he's saying is that his results are not different from what you'd expect from that strike location on his arm where he had injuries. But this is all speculation. Why don't we just let's see how the defense takes them apart.
Impacts and how you move post-impact are very sensitive to your exact body position. We don't know his exact body position at the point of impact, nor do we know the exact position on the ground. So, which is part of the reason why I haven't tried to exactly simulate this.
You didn't do a blue paint test with the vehicle going at 20 miles per hour, correct?
That is correct. I was not going to hit myself with a Lexus at 20 miles an hour.
You could have done other tests where the vehicle was going at 20 miles per hour if you used a crash test dummy, correct? You could have done that.
If you used the right crash test dummy, right, and then to set up the test, you have to know everything about the parameters. And so, again, pedestrian impacts are so very sensitive to initial angles. If I were to do a test and it was off a tiny, tiny bit and we got some different results, I would be in here having to defend it. Well, your own testing didn't show it. Point is we don't have enough information to be able to conduct that testing.
It begs the question. So they didn't have enough information to set up a high-speed test, but they did have enough information to set up a low-speed one. I think that's a fair question, but they also criticized Welcher for relying on a study from 1979. Have the physics of being hit by a car really changed in the last 40 years? I don't know. Maybe they have, considering that SUVs were not popular in 1979. But let's see how the defense continues to poke holes at him.
But it's also possible that under your theory that a collision occurred, that arm could have been impacted any part of the back of the vehicle. That's possible, isn't it?
That's not probable, no.
I'm asking, is it possible?
Anything is possible.
See, this is where we get into it, Drew, where you talked before about what's possible versus what's plausible.
I don't deal in possibilities, I deal in probabilities. It's not probable.
So, but you don't know exactly where the point of impact was.
So within the range of the light and the exact angle of the hand, no, I don't.
He can't know. There's no way to know because he doesn't know the exact angle at the time of John O'Keefe. He doesn't know how he was, if he was slouching or there's no way to know. So he wasn't trying to recreate exactly what happened. I think that's what people are missing. He's trying to show that there was a plausible theory and it could absolutely happen is what the prosecution is trying to say.
The defense is basically, first of all, their argument model is negation, just that you're wrong, which is really what defense is when you think about it. All that they really need to do is get up there and say you're wrong. They don't necessarily have to assert what is right. They do have an alternate plan here of trying to go with third-party culprits, but negation is really their argument. And in some ways, it's kind of peevish and kind of childish to just say "nah," it kind of comes off that way. But here's a question to the audience: is it fair to demand that Welcher has to be all-seeing and all-knowing for what he says is probably correct? I mean, he is an expert, but being all-knowing and being all-seeing really isn't the standard anywhere else in society. Your own job, whatever it is you do you have to be all-seeing and all-knowing to do your job correctly? Drew, what do you think?
I think it's a very fair question, but I also think this is how crash investigations go. This is how they went for decades and decades before the advent of a video camera being on every corner or on every garage door or every doorbell or whatever. You had to rely on the science to recreate what probably happened.
And common sense. In your era, you were sketching that out with a whiteboard. You didn't have these 3D models.
I actually had little cars and stuff. So Judson Welcher, sorry.
I've heard it both ways.
Is able to, because he had the benefit of video, discount beyond a reasonable doubt, in my opinion, that the taillight was broken on the GMC. There's no video standard to go by for this collision. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, that's very suspect. How come there's no video of this? It's because they erased it because, people dumped him there or whatever. Okay, well, that works both ways. If that guy had video, if Dr. Judson Welcher had video of Karen Reed backing up, he could overlay with 3D models and show you beyond a reasonable doubt that she ran over him, or ran into him anyway, not ran over him. But he's like a foremost expert in his field.
He was doing calculations on the stand. Like at one point, Alessi says, okay, so we're going to apply, we're going to apply Newton's second law. We're going to do it right here in real time. And I don't know about you, but like I couldn't go and do a multiplication on the blackboard in front of everyone. This guy could go do it. So he says, we're going to give you force and mass and acceleration, and we're going to assume this, and we're going to assume this, and a range of factors. And he basically put Welcher to the point where, so based off of this force and this mass moving at this acceleration, how many G forces would it exert? And this guy on the stand was able to say, well, within a range of certainty, depending on whether it was a direct blow or a glancing blow, it would probably deliver this many G's. And then Alessi's like, well, what effect does it have on the human body? He's like, how many G forces does it take to break a human arm? And so now they're getting into it as, and it's impossible to really figure out because there's so many variables. I mean, John's bone density, we don't even have an exact model for that. But he sits there and works it all out. And Alessi's trying to say, so if he got hit by the 6,000 pound Lexus going, 20 plus miles an hour, why doesn't he have any broken arm bones? And to his credit, Welcher was able to come back and say, well, you know what? He could have hairline fractures in his arm, his ulna, his radius, or whatever, wherever it was hit in his arm. But the medical examiner actually did not do x-rays on his arm. They know that he has trauma to his ribs from where the Lucas machine was trying to revive him, that he's got skull fractures. That was the cause of his death, was that trauma to his skull. But again, it's both sides just trying to disprove a negative. Why weren't there broken arm bones?
Right.
We don't know that there weren't broken arm bones. I thought it was very fascinating. Drew, I'll continue.
Of the hand? No, I don't. What I do know is at the rear tail light area.
So your assumption is that that because there's a tail light that is altered, it must have been by Mr. O'Keefe's arm. That's your conclusion, correct?
My conclusion is there are taillight fragments, a broken glass, lacerations to his arm, and his DNA on the back of the vehicle in the area of the taillight.
Sir, and Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike the DNA part of that answer for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I'm not going to strike it.
Okay, so you're making assumptions. You're taking what you view to be certain data, and you're coming to a conclusion, but that is based upon circumstantial information, correct? Is that fair?
Are you calling like pieces of the taillight at the scene around his body circumstantial information?
Sir, let me go to the force and go back to the force analysis. Let's go back to the numbers. I want to stay on, if we can, just the calculation.
Oh, unless he bit off more than he could chew there, because when you get to the point where the person on the stand is questioning you back, you're in trouble. He's like, let me get this straight. You think a piece of physical evidence is a piece of circumstantial evidence, because that's kind of a law school 101 thing. So unless he's like, I only want to talk about the calculations. Welcher testified that the totality of the evidence, which is a story that's worth more than the sum of its parts, or any mere calculation within that story, with all its variables and its multiple ranges, adds up to a scenario that's either probable or improbable. That's what Dr. Welcher can say is that what my model shows, this is probable, and what you assert is improbable. So let me ask you this, audience. Do you think that Robert Alessi was outsmarted here? It certainly looked like he had to do a little bit of backpedaling there. Welcher, I don't think at any point looked stupid or incompetent. You said that maybe he looked like a little bit overconfident, like a little bit smug. People don't like smart people.
Yes.
Drew, I think like maybe you know kind of how that goes. But you know, does it really come off that Welcher was like a mercenary egghead, that he was really willing to say anything for money? He said even on the stand that he doesn't have a dog in this fight. He doesn't care if Karen Reed goes to prison. It doesn't affect his bottom line. He's going to get paid either way. You know, is the defense going to go with this narrative that he's corrupt too? We've already heard the police are corrupt narrative. If you're the jury, are you going to be tired of hearing the narrative again that this expert witness is also corrupt?
This is my overall point in just about everything. It's reputational. Why would this guy? He's getting paid. So he got paid, I think, like $400,000.
And by the way, he only gets invited back to another trial based off of his performance here, his reputation here, and not his reputation for conviction, but his reputation for credibility.
This is a report card for future big lawsuits. Like if there's, let's just say, okay, if you can imagine, if just pick an imaginary theme park, we'll call it John's World. And John's World has a huge like swing thing, you know, like where people are just swinging, like it's just basically a centrifuge, and then it just starts swinging a little bit too fast and it flings somebody out of their seat. The attorneys for John's World are going to hire either the attorney for John's World or the people that are suing John's World who lost a loved one are going to hire this guy based on his reputation, his previous testimony, and his ability to be able to articulate exactly what probably happened for somebody to be flung from this seat, right? So why would he risk his reputation if he's getting $400,000 from the Commonwealth for this? Why would he risk his reputation on being the
all future earnings?
All for like, hey, look, I'm all in on this. And this goes to exactly what I'm saying about the police officers. I know we are trying to stay away from that in this one, but what I'm saying is, why would the DA, the prosecutor, the police lieutenant, the police sergeant, the detective who's already been fired,
why would they risk it all to convict
why
Karen
would they
Reed?
go all in just for Karen Reed? Like,
I want to just say about John's World, no refunds, and I apologize for nothing.
I got stuck on a like a Hershey Park. I got stuck on this thing. We were stuck up there for maybe an hour or so. They couldn't get us down. There was no emergency exit up there. It's not like they were going to roll fire trucks in to save all of us. So I think they had to repair stuff. And you know what? They gave us like a medium Pepsi. Like we didn't even get we got a voucher for a medium Pepsi, not a large, not a small, but a medium Pepsi for you know, this definitely life-threatening experience that
you knew what you were getting into. I would have let you die.
I know.
I've inspected the Lexus. I've looked at where it wasn't damaged. I've inspected the taillight. I got an exemplar Lexus. I ran lower speed contacts to verify that the injury pattern and location on the arm is consistent with the height and orientation of the taillight. And then I've looked at Miss Reed's interviews as well.
Based on all the evidence you considered, could you share with the jury what your opinion is to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, based on the totality of the evidence, DNA, everything I've talked about, that is consistent with that happening, and with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that is what happened.
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
So I'm going to strike that. I'm going to see counsel side just.
Move to strike. Disregard that moment, jury.
Yeah.
As I've said before, if I hear that as a juror, I'm going to super regard that. Anything that they say, like, I want to move to strike that for obvious reasons, like what he said about the DNA earlier. I'm like, what about this DNA? Like, I'm gonna hone in on that. Like, it would be easier for me as a bored juror, as a hungry juror, for you to just like gloss over that and not draw direct attention to it. But basically, what Dr. Welcher says at this point is, I looked at everything, and based on what I saw, Karen Reed definitely hit John O'Keefe with this car.
Karen Reed's
If I was a
guilty.
juror on this case, I would fucking string her up right now. And that is a problem. Are you surprised that we didn't get an immediate mistrial on that
Yes,
one? I mean, I personally would have
I
loved
am
that.
shocked. I am actually shocked that this was not a statement so strong to sway the jury so much that this could cause a mistrial. Now, what I'll say about Dr. Welcher, because I just went through this whole dissertation about his reputation and how this is, going to financially impact him for the rest of his life, and maybe future business for Aperture LLC and everything else. I don't think he consciously said that. I think it just slipped. I think he got out over his skis, and he was asked a direct question, and he gave a direct answer because they were on a roll talking about the reasonable degree of engineering certainty.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think he just got out a little bit over his skis and answered more than he was asked, which is an issue for the defense and the prosecution in this case, obviously.
Yeah. He
Yes,
had a decision, but he can't invade the province of the jury.
Yeah.
He essentially can't step into the role of deciding for them. He could say, in my opinion, with a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, this is consistent with what most probably happened. Like, the evidence that we have indicates this is what's most probable. But he says, like, that's what I believe for sure happened. He's had 200 trials. You'd think that he would know that you can't invade the province of the jury, essentially step into their decision-making shoes. But he was a little bit guided by the prosecution, maybe, to say this, that it was the big moment for the prosecution, that he knew that he had to knock this one out of the park. He should have used the word consistent more so in a summary. But here's what the judge said about it without the jury present, because she basically said, okay, get the jury out of here, stop everything. And like, also as a juror,
their ears out. Everyone wash their ears.
Yes. As a juror, if the judge says, okay, everybody get the hell out of here right now, I'm also be like, when in the 10 minutes while they're deciding what the fuck to do to save the trial, I'll be like, what was that about? Like, what was, I'm apparently not supposed, I heard something that was too true. And just as a cynic of the criminal justice system, all this stuff that comes in, what's discoverable, what's good evidence, how can it be presented, what about that evidence can't come in. And so if I was on a jury now, I would be very, very suspicious about what I was being told and what I was not being told, because both sides are going to tell me half of the story. That, well, I'm going to get half the story from the defense, half from the prosecution, but both sides are only allowed to tell me their half of their half. So I'm never going to get like an appreciable percentage of what actually happened. And so if I was a juror, I would be very confused. But here's what the judge said when she came back.
Dr. Welcher can testify that the data he downloaded and analyzed and the damage.
Can I just say that the woman who's like breathing on a shop vac or whatever, I'm not a good podcaster, I guess. I don't know what she's doing. Is she translating into Spanish? Is she breathing nitrous oxide? What is she doing?
That's a stenographer. That's
why is she breathing?
Because she's doing it text to speech. No, that's not right. Speech to text.
Well, then why don't they just use the microphone that's in front of the judge?
I think you need an official stenographer to do that.
A stenographer does this with 10 keys. Haven't you ever heard of 10 key? Why is she going all Top Gun Maverick with this thing on her face?
No, I think that she is doing basically a live recollection, a live recording.
I don't like
to memorialize the like. If you like, hey, can we read that back? That's where you're going. I don't know.
Can I make a request? Can she be sequestered somewhere in the background where I don't have to cuss or look at her? She's very distracting to me. We'll keep going.
to the Lexus is consistent with Ms. Reed's vehicle being in a collision. In addition, Dr. Welcher can testify that Mr. O'Keefe's injuries are consistent with his having been struck by a Lexus that is physically identical to Ms. Reed's Lexus. However, he may not testify that Ms. Reed's Lexus collided with Mr. O'Keefe because that conclusion is not based on the application of reliable scientific methodology.
I don't know if I agree with that. If there's DNA on there, I mean, I guess you could say, well, his DNA could have got on there by some other mean at some other time. I mean, that's reasonable to say, but there's no scientific experiment to prove that Karen Reed either intentionally or unintentionally hit John O'Keefe. I think
you bring a good point too, John, because I guarantee if there was DNA that was found on the opposite, if there was John O'Keefe's DNA found on the opposite side of the bumper, or his fingerprints, or something else, that the defense would be jumping up and down. Like they wouldn't be worried about whether a hair can make it from Dighton to Canton PD on the back of a bumper in a blizzard if it went their way. This did not go their way. It went the opposite way. It showed that there was DNA on the bumper. And if people think that you can plant a hair on the bumper, I don't know what to I really don't know what to tell you.
You can if you lick it first.
I guess so. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
God, I'm not sure what to make out of that. But Welcher's final opinion, when he got up there and he said, "This is what happened," it almost has the evidentiary weight of like a videotape of just watching it, and it shouldn't have that much weight because even though he may be one of the foremost experts in the world, they'll instruct the jury that you can hold any testimony that you hear in whole or in part to be reliable or valid or not. You can believe what you want to believe. This is an expert, but it's really on the jury to decide. The defense also is going to have their own credible experts who are going to come in. What are we going to say next week if they have like someone who like does the same thing that this guy does, but he does it in China, and he says like, I've got a video here that proves that like the taillight was definitely smashed in John O'Keefe's driveway. Like we're gonna have to compare those things and see. We're gonna have to like get a PhD ourselves to like figure out which one's real, and the jury's gonna have to figure that out on their own. And I don't know. We're just gonna have to decide who's more credible. This happens in a lot of cases, battles of experts. It happens a lot. I'm curious to see if the defense is going to put any of that forward. If you look at our comments, not to bring that too much into it, but people have been saying like this is a clear acquittal. The judge has not granted the motion for dismissing the case because this is an issue for the jury to decide.
It's common, yeah.
And they also have to decide because there's multiple charges whether or not maybe she's guilty of one and not some of the others. That's where they ran into a snafu in the first one. But
just to paint the picture, in 99% of the cases that are brought forward, there's a movement, like when the state rests, the defense is going to stand up and say, look, we're going to move for a judgment of acquittal.
They didn't meet their burden.
They didn't meet their burden. It happens in almost every trial, and in almost every trial, the judge is like, no.
They'll ask for it again, too, before it goes to the jury. They'll present the defense's case, and then they'll ask the judge again. I'm like, okay, so based off of what we just showed you, judge, could you dismiss this case? Because the judge has the power to do that. If some, we all watch TV where that moment happens where there's a confession on the stand. All right, I did it. Are you really going to still give it to the jury after someone else confesses? No. So they'll have the chance to give it to the judge again. I think the judge is going to give it to the jury to decide, as well they should. But Karen's lawyers cannot talk to the media. There's a gag order there. But as usual, Karen came out and talked. You mentioned constitutional rights often on the show. As we all know, Drew, the Constitution is a very old document, and it should be disregarded. It is not important. So let's hear what Karen has to say.
The data is what the data is, and it's going to come out cleanly, more cleanly in our case in chief. I think it's important to demonstrate what is the Commonwealth accusing me of. The speed, the positioning, recreate that for us. Back up into the crash test dummy at 24.2 miles an hour in the arm and see what happens. That's what I would want to see if I were you.
So,
well, of course,
let me say this first. Let me say this first. Fucking people, stop honking your horns. Every time we have Karen Reed go out there, I hear somebody honking their horn. You realize how rude the drivers are out there?
And the sirens.
Anyway, she's asking for like a full Mythbusters breakdown of the collision. She wants Jamie Heineman and Adam Savage to show up with a ballistics gel dummy and run the experiment 100 times like you'd see on the show. But here's the thing. Suppose you get Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman to come out and they do a great job like what we used to watch on Mythbusters. It's still the defense's job to negate all that. They'd be like, why are you bringing out special effects people from a reality TV show? This is serious. We want scientists. No matter what evidence gets put forward, it is the job of the defense. It's the job of the defense to discredit it. So what happens is we as spectators are watching this trial and we say, well, the defense just took that apart. I believe the defense. We don't like the cops, apparently. We don't like the prosecution. They're corrupt. They're all working together. They have this agenda to convict Karen Reed. Their agenda is also their job. It's their job to find justice for John O'Keefe. They're asserting that it's Karen Reed that did it. Well, all I'm asking the audience to do, and I know this is too much, but it's like, think critically about what the defense says. We must realize that the defense has been put up to the job and they must do this. This is how we have a fair system, is through rigorous defense. It's their job to do this, so I'm not begging them to stop. But it is their job through any means necessary within the confines of law and ethics and the Bar Association to do and say anything to discredit anyone who points a finger of accusation credibly at Karen Reed. It's their job to tear that down. So you have to realize that when the defense says something, you should be skeptical of them. When the prosecution says something, be skeptical of them. When a police officer gets on a stand and says something about a defendant, in this case or in any other case, be skeptical of them. We have to look at that's the purpose of having a trial. Otherwise, we would just believe the cop's report and send someone to prison. We have the trial because we have to give the scrutiny of critical thinking right beyond a reasonable doubt. But I just want that process for spectators to work both ways. When you see the defense assert a point, when you see the defense make a point or try to set up a third-party culprit, we have to remember they're driving after their agenda. They're trying to get a win here. And they don't care about whose lives they destroy in the meantime. They don't care whether it's a police officer, whether it's this witness who bought a Lexus. They don't care because their sole job is to exonerate Karen Reed. So you don't have to despise them for that. You can appreciate the fact that that's the system and that's the way that it's supposed to work. I'm glad that Karen Reed has a vigorous defense, because when we finally get to the truth, whatever that is, we can live with that. But we have to realize along the way, the defense has an agenda. And what is their agenda? It's not unclear. We know they're trying to exonerate Karen Reed. So when they assert something, just be critical about it. Say, is this true, or is this something the defense is trying to assert to discredit someone else? True.
I would ask you to ask yourself, why is it that they beat their chests so hard and so loudly in the first trial about how horrible Michael Proctor was, and about how the evidence was planted and this is a deep conspiracy between the DA and everything else? Yet when they had Michael Proctor on the stand, they never asked him directly about planting evidence. Don't you think if they actually thought he had planted evidence that they would ask him on the stand, at least to get him to commit?
It'd be a great time, because he'd either have to say, yes, I planted evidence, which says like, well, case dismissed, or he'd say, no, I didn't. And then if they could prove that later, there's your perjury conviction.
There's your perjury. I mean, like all day long.
So there's no reason for them not to ask him that.
Right. And that's multiple levels, because that's not just perjury, but the planting of evidence is like a whole separate, under the color of law. Like, that's a huge federal violation. Like, he's destined for prison for the rest of his life. And you've got him on the stand. You've got him in your crosshairs. You've already got the jury all riled up because he said the C word and all these other things. And I'm not discounting that. That was a horrible thing he did. It was unprofessional, and it lent the air of bias. But essentially what he was saying is, like, what he was pleading with America and the jury, Michael Proctor, was like, take my dumbass conduct out of this and look at the evidence I was looking at, because that will lead you to exactly what we're trying to say here, that Karen Reed is responsible for this. And the defense's job is to say, don't look over there, look over here. He's dirty, he's nasty. You should hate his family. You should hate, like, make a big show out of it, make a big circus out of it, and let everyone be distracted. Let them, what's that about the bread and circus and everything else? So when you've got Alan Jackson, look, Massachusetts is not unfamiliar with Alan Jackson, I hope, because he was the defense attorney in one of the Kevin Spacey cases.
You gotta love Kevin Spacey, right? Great guy.
He defended Kevin Spacey when the bartender made the accusation. And what was his MO in that case, John? What ultimately got that case thrown out? It was because the victim in the case wouldn't turn over his cell phone because it had a bunch of other stuff on there, and he had to plead the fifth and all this other stuff. So, sound familiar? It was an attack on the victim. It was just another attack on the victim, and it clouded the actual responsibility. Next thing you know,
we're not saying that Michael Proctor's. We're not saying that Michael Proctor's.
I'm not saying he's a saint, not by any stretch. He's paying a price.
But if let's just say for a second, like I know this is so much to ask, but if you believe Karen Read is innocent, I know this is so much to ask, but I want you to consider this scenario. Suppose be on the side of John O'Keefe. Like that's whose side you should really be on.
That's all I'm saying.
But suppose for the sake, let's run a hypothetical experiment of our own, right? Let's suppose that Karen Read ran over or hit John O'Keefe and knocked him down, and his head hit the pavement, and he
didn't know it,
and he died. Whether she knew it or not knew it, let's suppose that happened. Let's suppose that she actually is guilty as a hypothetical experiment. Now, let's take the investigation of that and we give it to a guy like Michael Proctor who makes all these mistakes. Should we not find the person who killed John O'Keefe, which for the sake of argument in this experiment is Karen Read? Should we let her off the hook because Michael Proctor did a terrible job? We should protect her rights to the fullest extent of the law, but we still have to get Karen Read for killing John O'Keefe in this experiment where we know for a fact that she did it. Michael Proctor is a complicating factor. He's a variable. He's something that makes it more difficult to get to the truth. But suppose that's what happened. We're just supposed to let Karen Read off because Michael Proctor did a bad job. I'm not sure that that's justice. You could say maybe that's fair or that's how it works or that's life, but I don't feel like that's justice for John.
It's not. It's they have gaslit you not you, but some of you into believing that somehow justice for John O'Keefe includes freeing Karen Read. And it's the perfect scenario because they win both ways.
Yeah.
But that's
heads I win, tails you lose is the situation they set up.
That's exactly right. It's not the reality. The reality is John O'Keefe has a family. John O'Keefe was a good man. And I'm sure that he's missed by his niece and his nephew and his mother and his brother and his close friends and everybody else. And he does not deserve the circus that is surrounding this case. And so this is why I get into trouble when I say this. Both sides deserve the same reverence. You got to give reverence to the O'Keefes, and you got to give reverence to the defendant who is on trial for his being responsible for his death. You got to give reverence to both sides. It's a very serious thing. This is not a we should choose one side or the other. Like, it's an evaluation of full facts, not clouded issues, not people pointing fingers when they don't even actually have to testify on the stand. Just do a little research on Alan Jackson if you have a spare moment. I mean, he defended Harvey Weinstein, he defended Kevin Spacey, and now he's defending Karen Read. And in the same fashion, we're blaming the victim in this whole thing.
Just, not to do guilt by association, but it does make you wonder what kind of position Karen Read is in if she needs the attorney to the supervillains.
Yeah.
I will say this about.
That's her right. That's totally her right. Like, I would do the same thing.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be facing, if I was innocent, I want to be facing life in prison. But I also want to say this, like, she mocked that Welcher's analysis. So we just to close out, we talked about how he's one of the foremost experts in his field, that we literally depend on him for our lives every time we get on a roller coaster, which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I hate pretending that I'm dying for fun. So I don't like roller coasters. But she mocked his analysis. She said that his analysis is not scientifically rigorous. It begs another question. Karen, you were the driver. Can you tell us why you were driving in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour?
Exactly.
If you want someone who's going to be a real expert, if there's one person who knows better than Welcher, it's the one person who is at the scene who's still alive to talk about it. And it was your Lexus and you were driving it. And we have data that says that you were driving in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour, which is not crawling. If you're driving in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour, you're hauling ass. And is that because you're a drunk driver, or is it because you're driving mad, or is it because you're a bad driver? I think you could go ahead and you could cop to being a bad driver at any time.
Or are the tires spinning because it's an icy road or whatever? But like,
I think even with four-wheel drive, the differential would show that your tires were spinning and not getting traction, because wouldn't it? I don't know. I don't know.
True.
I'm not sure how that would work, but there might be
one person that can clear it up, and she's more than likely not going to take the stand. She says TBD. I say there's no way she's taking the stand.
Why didn't the press ask her, Karen, why were you driving in reverse at
24.2 miles an hour?
Because they're throwing her softballs because they like it every day they come out, and she pays them attention. So they don't. That's another thing too. And we had this in the comments too. Someone was watching coverage of American policing from the other side of the world, and they say, oh, the only thing they see is negative. Right. You have to remember your source for information.
Right.
If it's the media, then that means they're trying to sell commercials. If it's on YouTube, then what trends in an algorithm? Karen Reed stuff's trending right now in an algorithm. You're not seeing the stuff that the Massachusetts State Police did yesterday that saved somebody's life. That's not going to trend, right? By the same token, what's selling? What's driving this media? It's commercials. It's the Karen Reed story. They want Karen Reed to come out every night and drive up their ratings. And if they ask her a hardball question, Karen, why were you driving in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour? Clear it up right now. They know that she's going to clam up. She's not going to say anything. Robert Alessi's going to yank on her hair, and they're going to get in the car, and that's the end of the interview. So they had an opportunity to ask for it. The media is not asking the questions they should be asking, because they're preserving their status as being able to have access to Karen Reed to drive revenue for themselves. They can charge more for commercials when they have interviews with Karen Reed. It's simple money. Just follow the money.
Yeah, it's not an exciting trial without this stoked debate.
Yeah,
and look, I've been accused of being a grifter like 2 or 3 times. I don't care. You can tell. You
were accused of being a grifter by someone who believes in astrology.
Well, the thing is too, John. Like, is Court TV a grifter? Is Law and Crime a grifter? Like,
they definitely capitalize off of the tragedy of real people.
We're talking about current events, and you're here to watch. And if you want to watch, that's perfect. I love having you here. I don't enjoy the personal attacks, and you're probably going to get a little snappy answer from me, but
I enjoy the personal attacks.
If you have something to add to the conversation, I'm begging you to comment on it. Like, I answer, John and I answer, as John says, 99.9% of the comments. So.
And if you want to be a part of the show, don't forget that you can actually call in. You can dial 848-COMM-911. That's 848-266-6911.
Nice.
Drew, with your permission, I'll go ahead and play our voicemail.
Please.
Hi there. I was really enjoying your show. Subscribed, but had to unsubscribe because, you never took us all the way through the poor child murder and what happened with that one before comparing the players that were involved. I'm like, feel like I'm left hanging. That's all. You guys seem like you got a good thing going. Keep it up. Bye. Oh, you stupid thing. I'm trying to hang up, but I got an accidental touch protection thing. God damn it.
You're never going to hear the end of the story if you unsubscribe. Thank you for saying our show's nice, and I'm sorry that you called us to say that you were leaving. I guess I encourage you to come back if it's not too late. If you're talking about the Sandra Birchmore case, that case is still under investigation by the feds. It hasn't gone before a jury yet. I'm sure that when that case happens, if it doesn't plead out, we'll be all over it. We don't have all the facts yet. So I want to know what happened to Sandra Birchmore too. It's just, that's all still kind of in progress. And we talked about Sandra Birchmore as a tangent or as an aside to Karen Reed, which is what we're covering right now. So yeah, if you want to hear more about Sandra Birchmore, Just stick around. Don't unsubscribe.
I'm not like, look, she's entitled to her opinion. I get what she's. I really do get what she's saying. Like she's saying, like, look, you set me up to watch this true crime story about Sandra Birchmore. Then you never really told us how she died and all that other stuff.
That's a good point. Should I quit the show though for the same reason because we didn't finish it?
The episode is literally titled, I'm looking at it, Shocking Link Between Sandra Birchmore and Karen Reed.
Right.
That's what we were covering. We were covering that angle. We weren't necessarily covering the death of, and maybe we should. Maybe we should have gone a little bit more in depth. I want to talk
about Sandra Birchmore and when it talks about and so that we don't get accused of like bootlicking or holding up the thin blue line. Like, let's take down the terrible activities of Detective Matthew Farwell. I'm ready to put him on blast based off of what I've seen. I'm going to treat him fairly, but that seems like some pretty bad behavior that needs to be called out by everybody. And we'll show the audience that police officers do not like that behavior. And so resubscribe, come back, watch more Sandra Birchmore stuff.
If anyone knows her, please tell her to resubscribe and help her with that touch thing on her phone.
Yeah, so she had a hard time there.
Like, I'll say this. Look, this is something I wrote a long time ago. The thin blue line was never a veil to hold secrets so police could operate in the dark. It's more of a blackout curtain so the rest of society doesn't have to endure the ugliness that actually takes place every day. Listen, God forbid you have to pull a kid out of a pool and do CPR while his parents are screaming in your face. God forbid you have to go knock on a door at 2 a.m. and tell a parent that their 18-year-old baby is no longer with us because he was killed in a car accident. That's what the thin blue line is all about. You're painting with broad strokes when you say that we're just all corrupt. That's
the
all.
other thing is too is I take a little bit of offense to it because like I arrange their meetings between police and the public,
right.
And I don't have any of this thin blue line crap going on. Like I just like the police as much as anyone, but I don't think they're corrupt. So
right,
folks, if you want to watch back through our prior episodes, really appreciate it. Make sure you're tickling the algorithm, hit like, hit subscribe, tell a friend, put it in the group text, tell everyone that you saw Comm Center. We appreciate it. Drew,
there's a whole look.
The episode's over. Has it been a pleasure?
It's been a pleasure. There's a whole series about Salvatore Aldrade, which is another injustice.